Oh, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Well, really broad NFL related. A huge trade just went down in the NFL world as Russell Wilson will now be headed to the AFC. I had just finished my first mock draft. I was getting set to film it. I had the Denver Broncos taking Malik Willis, actually trading up with the New York Giants. I will not be doing that any longer in my first mock draft. I'll have to rip that up, and I'll probably have it up for you guys tomorrow. But the huge news just came out in the NFL world that the Seattle Seahawks will, in fact, be trading Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. And there have been rumors now with Russell Wilson for the last 2 or 3 years that they may end up moving him. And the Denver Broncos were a team that a lot of people talked about that we're going to be in the market for a veteran quarterback. A lot of people pointed towards Aaron Rodgers. Well, earlier today, the news came out about Aaron Rodgers signing a record-breaking contract, 4 years, $200 million, $50 million a year on average, to stay with the Green Bay Packers. My guess is as soon as that came out, Denver decided to pull the trigger, and my guess is they gave up a king's ransom to get him. The exact specifics have not come out yet. I'll talk about it in this video as to what exactly they've said what is involved in the trade, but the exact specifics have not come out yet. Russell Wilson, I believe, is going to be 34 next year, a former Super Bowl champion. And a lot of people have talked about how he's tailed off a little bit, but what I could point to there is the Seattle Seahawks offensive line has been absolutely dreadful. Now he goes into a situation that is much more tilted towards what he is going to need to potentially win a Super Bowl. You look at that Denver Broncos team, they've got a ton of young weapons on that offense. They have a better offensive line than what they have in Seattle, and they definitely have a very potent defense. So I think it's a really good fit. I think of all the teams that potentially could be in the market for a veteran quarterback, the Denver Broncos made the most sense. And if you're going to take a swing for the fences. Russell Wilson still remains one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. It's obviously a risky trade based on what they're going to give up, but you're getting Russell Wilson, and you're giving yourselves an opportunity to compete. And now when you look at the conference, when you look at the AFC specifically, it is absolutely loaded to the point where the NFC almost looks like a minor league conference. Like I said on Twitter, think about all the good young quarterbacks in the NFL before this trade. Not that Wilson's young, but you had Justin Herbert, you had Joe Burrow, you had Josh Allen, you had Pat Mahomes, you still have Deshaun Watson, at least as of now. Now you add Russell Wilson to that. David Carr is even a pretty good quarterback. So Derek Carr, rather. So there are so many young, good quarterbacks in the AFC conference. In the NFC, it's really just Kyler Murray, at least as of now, as a known commodity that's relatively young at the quarterback position. Of course, Aaron Rodgers stays on, but he's going to be 39 years old. So the power in the NFL seems to be shifting, at least at the quarterback position, to the AFC conference. That doesn't even include some of the younger quarterbacks that were taken in last year's draft, most of whom were taken in the AFC conference that may evolve into becoming very good quarterbacks. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But how could this potentially affect the New York Giants? We'll get into that in this video as well. First, let's speak on the trade. Blockbuster. The Seahawks and Broncos have agreed in principle on a trade adding 9-time Pro Bowl quarterback Russell Wilson to Denver for a massive haul, including multiple first-round draft picks, plus additional picks and players per sources. One player that will be involved in that trade is Drew Lock, according to Pelissero. Lock was drafted in the second round, I think 3 years ago. I think he went to Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of New York Giants fans thought we could potentially take him in that draft. Has been very underwhelming. Lost the starting job last year to Teddy Bridgewater. Of course, Bridgewater could potentially be looking for a new home now as well. But Lock included in this trade, according to Pelissero. The Broncos informed quarterback Drew Lock he's been traded to Seattle as part of the Russell Wilson deal per sources, which begs the question, is Seattle going to go into next year just completely punting the season and maybe having a bit of a quarterback carousel at the start of the year in training camp between Drew Lock and maybe another veteran? Or are they potentially going to be in the market to draft a quarterback in this year's draft? I could only assume they're going to have that 9th overall pick now, along with several others based off of this trade. Well, if Seattle moves up to 9, suddenly a team that clearly needs a quarterback for the future, unless they feel Drew Lock could be that guy, are now in the potential spot to take one, or potentially to trade up and go get him. Now, if the Seattle Seahawks want a guy like Malik Willis, they're more than likely going to have to trade up. If Carolina's not going to take him, there's a good chance that somebody else will trade up ahead of them, knowing that Seattle could take a quarterback and snag him there. A team potentially like the Washington football team, who clearly expressed interest in trying to get a quarterback. Word had come out about 2 weeks ago that Washington, the Commanders, I should say, that's their new team name, actually proposed a trade to the Seattle Seahawks in which they offered a ton to go and get Russell Wilson, and it was turned down. which makes me very curious as to what was offered in this trade for Seattle to be able to part ways with Russell Wilson. But I think the signing of Aaron Rodgers is what ultimately led to this. We knew that Denver was looking for a veteran quarterback. Now they go out and get him, and they gave up a ton to do so. But you have to think it's at least possible that Seattle could be in the market to potentially trade up now and go get a quarterback. Who will that be with? It could very well be the New York Giants. This could be a trade partner. The Giants sit at 5. The Carolina Panthers, who could very well take Malik Willis or Pickett or whoever, sit at 6. So they could look to jump them there with the Giants pick at number 5 overall. That remains to be seen. What could the Giants get in a trade like that? If you jump from 9 to 5, maybe a future first-round pick. We'll have to wait and see. Now, like I said earlier, Seattle could decide to sit and wait at the quarterback position, know that they have a ton of draft capital, and wait a year to go and get their quarterback in a year in which a lot of people feel it's a much stronger quarterback draft class. I've done some research on these prospects over the last couple of weeks. I am a huge fan of C.J. Stroud, and if you look at most mocks, he's penciled in to be the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. Seattle without Russell Wilson is not going to be very good. You factor in that they're going to have a lot of future draft capital. If I was a Seahawks fan, that is probably the route I would want to go at this point in time. I think it's a good trade for Seattle because I don't think that you were getting anywhere near winning a Super Bowl with Russell Wilson as your quarterback the way your team is right now built. You guys have a poor offensive line. You guys, I think, are probably trending towards making a change at the head coaching spot sooner than later. I'm a little bit surprised you guys brought back Pete Carroll to begin with this year. I think it's obviously a sign now when you traded Russell Wilson that you're going to start a rebuild. If I was a Seahawks fan, I'd probably want to wait a year to go get that quarterback. But as a Giants fan, I would much rather them want to trade up to get a guy like Malik Willis this year. It would be one less team that could potentially draft a quarterback in 2023, a year in which the New York Giants may be looking to take one if they don't take one this year, and if Daniel Jones does not develop into the quarterback that some Giants fans may feel he can be. If they wait that year, you have to think Seattle becomes one of the favorites to be able to get a guy like C.J. Stroud or Young or somebody else in that class, the top quarterback off the board in 2023. But it'll be interesting to see how this shakes up this year's draft. I had my mock draft all ready and done with. I'll have that out for you guys tomorrow. This trade shook things up. One of the biggest trades in recent memory in the NFL. Whenever you see a quarterback the caliber of Russell Wilson changing conferences. And I think this makes Denver probably one of the 5 or 6 favorites to win the Super Bowl. The AFC West, though, I'll say this, is absolutely stacked at the quarterback position, which makes even more sense why Denver probably felt they had to go out and make a move like this. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, like I said, with Carr with the Raiders, and you got Justin Herbert with the Chargers, who's an emerging young quarterback. Should be really fun to see how it plays out in the AFC West and just the AFC Conference in general next year with all the young, talented quarterbacks they have in that conference, and they just added another very talented quarterback with Russell Wilson. Of course, it's the same spot where Peyton Manning went to later in his career. He ultimately won a Super Bowl, put up a lot of good statistical seasons. They're arguably the greatest statistical season ever. I think his first or second year there with the Denver Broncos. Well, now Russell Wilson goes to the thin air. He's got weapons all over the field, and he's got one of the better defenses in football. I think it's a great landing spot for Russell Wilson. I remember that there were a couple of rumored landing spots that Russell Wilson may want to go to. The New York Giants were listed, in the top 3 or 4, and I always said that doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a football standpoint, and I always thought the Denver Broncos, and I think most people thought the Denver Broncos made a whole lot of sense. The Denver Broncos seem to be the type of team that's really a quarterback away from being able to compete for a Super Bowl. Well, now they got their quarterback, and if you're a Broncos fan, you're probably really excited. If you have a chance to win a Super Bowl, you're willing to part ways with a lot of picks. We'll see how it all plays out, but excited to see Russell Wilson in a Denver Broncos uniform, and I'm excited to see what Seattle now decides to do in this year's draft. Potentially could be a team looking to partner up with the New York Giants. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.